Recording. All right. So looks like check. We are live on Facebook. We are recording here. So hello, everyone. It is October 15th. I'm Jamie Hartman. I'm coming to you live from my office here on a sunny day in Alexandria, Virginia. And I have 5 total questions to answer. They come from 3 different people. So I'm going to dive right in. If you have questions that you want to have me answer in a future session, I will put a link in the comments for how you can submit those to my website. And then I can, if I need to do a little research ahead of time, I will, and then I'll answer the question. And I'll also email you a recorded copy of this. So if you don't catch it live, you can always watch it at any time. So the first question, actually the first 2 questions come from the same person. And I'm going to combine them because I think they're related. So this comes from Joyce, and she asked, how do you combat extreme fatigue throughout the day? And she asked how she can manage her sleep better. She said her sleep is irregular. How do I get better sleep specifically is what she said. And obviously, those 2 questions go together, because if she could figure out how to get her sleep regular, which I realize is a big issue, and I'll talk about that in a second, it's likely that at least some of that fatigue during the day would improve. The fatigue during the day is a symptom, at least partially, of that poor sleep. And so we can't really treat the symptom without treating the cause. So what I would want to focus on first is trying to get to the, troubleshoot the sleep. It's hard to say what's going on with sleep. There's tons of advice out there. Some people really just need to make a few habit changes and their sleep improves. But a lot of people I've talked to, they've already done all that stuff. They've already changed their sleep environment. So their room is really dark and cool and comfortable. They've already eliminated the electronic distractions from their room. So their phone isn't anywhere nearby. There's no TV. They've already, implemented a nighttime routine to wind down, to maybe do some meditation or some quiet activity. Maybe they've already gone through all of these things and they're still finding sleep irregular. If you haven't, those are the first things to do. Sleep hygiene is what we call it, where you get yourself into a situation where you are not adding anything to pollute your sleep environment. So blackout curtains might be something, earplugs might be something, a noise machine might be something to consider. Definitely getting rid of any electronics. It's really tempting when you have your phone next to your bed, your smartphone, to pick it up and then use it to entertain yourself instead of sleeping. And that has all kinds of downstream effects, not the least of which is that it stresses you out, at least stresses me out. So that would be the first thing. Get the phone away from the bed if it's not already. And if your, electronic drug of choice is television, get that out of your bedroom. Those are a couple of things to do right away. If you've already done all that stuff, if you're already doing, everything quote unquote right, and sleep is still eluding you, or regular sleep is still eluding you, there are a couple of things to troubleshoot. One thing that I see a lot of people have happen is that they might fall asleep okay and wake up with kind of a jolt at about 2-ish a.m., somewhere right around there. And it almost feels like they're, just rocketed up out of bed, or they feel like they're, they've been shocked as they wake up with a start. They don't know why. There's no noise or anything, but their body's actually reacting as if there was. If that's happening to you, that's a pretty good indicator that you likely are having some blood sugar dysregulation. And what has happened is that your body hits that point where the blood sugar level has dropped while you were sleeping so low that it fired up some adrenaline to keep you going, to kind of deal with that low blood sugar emergency that it perceived happened. Now we know that's kind of ridiculous. The body's confused because there's no emergency if you're sleeping, but it's got some dysregulation, some signals that are crossed. A short-term way to address that, if that's what's happening, is to have a small snack right before you go to bed. Nothing too heavy. You don't want to have something really hard, to digest, something that's going to, cause other issues in terms of giving you comfortable sleep. but just something that will keep your blood sugar from doing that overnight. That's not a long-term, requirement for most people. That might just be a short-term intervention that some people have to do while they're working on getting healthier. So if that's something that's happening, consider that by, a small snack, I mean something, it's not much. It doesn't need to be a lot. And it doesn't need to be, any particular macronutrient composition. The only thing I would say to stay away from is that you don't want it to be just like straight up sugars, which you're probably not going to be doing if you're following AIP anyway. So if you were going to have, like, say, an apple before bed as part of, your snack, maybe also have with that some kind of fat source or some protein source to slow it down. So, because the whole idea is to keep your blood sugar more stable rather than a boost and then a drop, So that's one thing to troubleshoot, one thing to look at. Other factors can be if you're having a hard time falling asleep, having a hard time relaxing, you might consider taking a magnesium supplement before you go to bed. That helps a lot of people, and many people are indeed deficient in magnesium. So that can be another tool to help you prepare for sleep. Some of my clients who have gut issues, they find that magnesium orally is going to cause some diarrhea. So they're better off doing like a magnesium spray or a magnesium lotion so it absorbs through their skin. Another way you can get that is by taking an Epsom salt bath before bed. That can help some people sleep. So that's helping if you're having trouble falling asleep. And then there can also be some, things that you do more in your mind that can help you to fall asleep. So listening to a recording of a guided meditation for sleep, or like one of my favorites is a yoga nidra session to help you get your brain into that sleep state, or sleep stories through an app like Calm or something like that. Now, I know I just said a little while ago that you should get your phone out of the bedroom. So these two things can be hard to sort of, figure out a balance for. I've heard of some people have like an old device that they don't use for anything other than their meditation recordings. So it might be an old what were those called? iPod. I can't even remember what they're called. An old iPod, or even an old phone that doesn't have service anymore, and they're able to, connect it to their Wi-Fi or something. So, the other way, if you do only have your one device, your one phone, is to use the app control, so that you're not, the only thing that it would give you access to at night would be that app that lets you listen to the sleep stories. So that's all kind of for personal, people to figure out the balance there. But I know some people that really helps. It's helped me during the times when I was traveling for work and sleeping odd hours in odd locations. I had a couple sleep meditations that just they saved my life, I think, because that's what would help me get to sleep when nothing else worked. And so that can be helpful as well. And then once you can troubleshoot all of that, then we can start to tackle the fatigue during the day, because until you've tackled that, we don't know how much of that fatigue that you're feeling during the day is a result of just simply the fact that you're not getting the sleep you need the night before, and how much of it is something relating to how you're eating or how you're structuring your day. One thing to remember is that even when we're at our healthiest state, and everything's just, going great, we still have a natural circadian rhythm. And you should recognize that. And if it's at all possible for you to build your life with that in mind, take advantage of that possibility. I've had to learn that myself, being a health coach now full time and being self-employed. I do have control over my schedule, but of course I'm kind of a type A achiever personality. So I resisted the idea of, maybe I should just accept that from about 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. is I'm tired. It's not my brain's best time to focus. And so maybe I should just build a schedule, since I can, that allows me to do, not work tasks, not see clients between 2 and 4, not plan on, having meetings or doing big projects between 2 and 4, so that I can honor my body's natural rhythms. So keep that in mind too. Of course, I know that's not what you're asking. You asked about extreme fatigue, which can have many causes. But the first thing to tackle is to figure out what's going on at night so you can get your days feeling better. But I do work with people on this. So if that's something you want to get some more further personalized coaching on, that's something we can look at. What are you eating? When are you eating? And how might that help you with the fatigue? Are you missing some key nutrients? You'd be amazed how many people feel like they're eating AIP and they're doing a pretty good job. But when we look at their food journal, we realize there's actually big gaps in what they should be eating because we're so focused on what we're not eating. So that's another thing I would investigate if you were my client and we were looking at your food journal is, what are you eating and when, and how to sort that out. So those two questions both came from the same person. And so hopefully that answers a little bit, maybe gave you a few little tidbits there, ideas for things to try to address that fatigue, that energy issue. And then the third question that came from the same person was about testing. And what tests do I recommend for autoimmunity? What tests can determine if there's autoimmune disease going on? And is there a test to measure inflammation? So first of all, I forgot to say my disclaimer at the beginning of this. This is all just information just for informational purposes. None of this is medical advice. You should talk to your own doctor about any of these things. And especially when it comes to testing, I can't tell you what tests you should get. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not the person who does diagnoses. I don't diagnose people. I help people either once they've figured out what their diagnosis is, or even if they don't have it, but they know how they're feeling, I help them implement some strategies that are not medical, that are not medical interventions, but are dietary and lifestyle adjustments that can help them feel their best. And to help them live well with their diagnosis. And again, I do work with people who don't yet have a diagnosis, but are sort of in that path. And one of the things I'll help with my clients is helping them talk to their doctor about the questions to ask, the tests maybe the doctor is considering to ask them about. There is no definitive test for autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is a category. It's not a particular diagnosis. So to clearly answer her question, the tests that will diagnose the autoimmune diseases, one or multiple of them, vary depending on the body part of the body system that is impacted. So for example, the autoimmune disease that I have, the primary one that I have is Crohn's disease, which affects the digestive tract. So the test that diagnosed that for me was administered by a gastroenterologist. There were a couple blood tests and stool tests that gave them the right idea, that's probably what she has. And the ultimate test that gave the definitive diagnosis was a colonoscopy with a biopsy. People with celiac disease, it's kind of a similar story, but it's the other end of the digestive tract. So celiac disease, as many people know, is an autoimmune reaction that's triggered by the consumption of gluten, not just wheat, of gluten, which is primarily in wheat, but in a couple other grains as well. And so then it's blood tests give them an idea, and then there's an endoscopy and a biopsy. So it comes down through the mouth into the small intestine. If it's an autoimmune disease that affects the skeleton, it might be, scans, body scans, x-rays, CT scans. If it's an autoimmune disease that affects the skin, maybe a visual test. So there are a number of tests that can be done to get to that diagnosis. There is not a single test. And then is there a test for inflammation? Yeah, there are a couple tests that doctors will use to track inflammation. It's not quite as clear cut, I think, as a lot of people want to believe that you can take a blood test and it'll tell you yes or no, you are inflamed. I know one of the tests that my doctor will track, just a sort of routine gastroenterology follow-up, the doctor has said, when it's high, I don't always know for sure if it's from, the autoimmune disease flaring up, or if it's high because maybe your body is dealing with some inflammation that's natural and normal, like you've hurt your arm, you hurt your wrist and it's healing and all that kind of thing, or you had a cold and it's getting better. So there are a couple blood tests that can do that. If you're talking about, again, I have a lot of personal experience with gastroenterology type disorders. So there's also a stool test that can tell if there's inflammation happening in the colon. That's pretty helpful for doctors to track whether Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis are improving or not. There are multiple different tests again, and I can't really say what tests I recommend because that isn't really my scope. But when I work with my clients to figure out what kind of testing they need, we can brainstorm together, and I'll usually ask them, what tests have you had and what did the doctor say the results were? And then I'll give me some ideas of things they might ask for to help get to a diagnosis. So hopefully that helps. The next question is about one of the reintroduction foods. It's a stage 1 reintroduction that a lot of people will ask about, and it's ghee. So this person said, I've heard that ghee is actually safe for AIP. In fact, I was advised by my doctor that I could have ghee, even though he said be on AIP. But then I read that you're not supposed to have ghee. So what's the story? And it is confusing because there are some differences of opinion on this one. Now, if the world was perfect and there never was any human potential for mistakes or just sloppiness to come into play, theoretically, ghee should be completely fine because ghee is clarified butter. So we all know what, or we should know what butter is. Butter is the fat from milk. So we start with whole milk. They take the fat out, they do some things to it to, salt it, whatever, to turn it into butter. So it's fat with some protein and some lactose. That's what butter is, mostly fat. And then when they turn it into ghee, it's heated so that they can remove the milk solids. So with the solids go all the milk protein and all of the milk carbohydrates, the sugars, the lactose, and left is only the fat. So it's just pure fat. It started out as, milk, but it's everything else gets removed, and it's all through natural processes. This is nothing like, chemical involved. It's just applying some heat basically. And you end up with ghee, clarified butter, however you want to, think of it. So all those solids are removed. Now, again, that's in theory. In reality, very often there are still some trace amounts of the milk protein. Casein is the name of the milk protein you'll hear talked about. And there may even be, although less likely, some trace amounts of the carbohydrate, the sugar, lactose. In some people, that's enough. If they are truly allergic to casein, to the protein that's found in milk, or they are very sensitive to it, that might just be enough to keep them inflamed and keep their autoimmunity active when we're in the AIP elimination phase. And that would be a shame because they're eliminating everything else. They're doing everything else they need to do, but perhaps the fact that they're still using ghee and they are just that sensitive is keeping them from seeing the progress that they really need. So when I work with my private clients, my individual clients, I do tell them to eliminate all dairy products, including ghee, for at least the first 30 days, because I want to see. I don't want them to just have this sense of they're doing it 99% and there's an off chance that 1% might still be causing problems for them. And then it can be one of the very first reintroductions. So clear the slate, take a month, take 30 days where you don't consume it at all, so you can see how you do, and then do the ghee as a reintroduction and see how you do. And if you feel like it made no change, you feel just exactly the same, then that's a pretty good indication that you tolerate that even if there are trace amounts of protein in there, it's not enough to trigger anything for you. And you could safely use that as one of your options for cooking fat. And it's a good option for cooking fat. If you can tolerate it, ghee provides benefit. There's a reason people do it. So, yeah, that's just my opinion on it. I'm not going to tell you that somebody who says you can have it is wrong. My experience is that I'd say it goes 50-50. This is just my general, this is not scientific, but my general experience with my clients is it kind of goes 50-50. When we get to that phase of reintroducing it, maybe about half of my clients are like, totally, it's fine. I could have been eating ghee all along, I bet, and you just made me avoid it for a month. But they test it, they find that it's fine. They're able to add it back into their diet. They may not have had it ever before, but they can add it into their diet and they feel really good. And then there's another 50% that struggle with it. And they might not even kind of recognize it right away. They think they passed the reintroduction, They start eating it every day. Some symptoms start to come back. They ask me if I think maybe it's the ghee, and I say, well, the only way to know is to cut it back out again and see. So, and you know, and I'll say ultimately that the people that have to cut it back out again and see, and then, you know, try it again, the end result mixes. You know, some people discover that they really can't ever have it. Other people just need a little more time to heal, and then they can. So I figure the smartest thing to do is to just take a shortcut, give yourself at least 30 days without it, see how you feel at the end of those 30 days, test it, see how you feel after testing it, and then decide from there. Decide. You don't have to follow anybody's arbitrary rules with ghee. You know, you can decide if you want to include it or not. One of the things I will say that's important to recognize is that when it does come time to do all the reintroductions, if you don't tolerate ghee when you do the reintroductions, like let's say you are one of those, you know, in that 50-50 side of it, the 50 side that's like, it doesn't seem to work very well for me. You would want to stop there in terms of all the other dairy products, because if your body doesn't do well with ghee, it's not going to do better with the other dairy products. You know, ghee is the least likely to cause a reaction in all of that family of dairy products. So if you don't tolerate that, do not come back and say, and now I want to try cheddar cheese, because we've already sort of established that your body's not ready for that. It's not necessarily forever, but for now anyway, you're not. So you want to follow the stages for that family, since it's always just components of the same thing. It's important. There's a lot of conversation about, well, what type? Should it be A1 milk or A2 milk? Should it be cow's milk? Should it be sheep's milk? Should it be grass-fed? Should it be organic? Those are all things to experiment with for yourself, but just understand the why ghee is something that many of us, and I'm included in that, even though like in theory it should be okay, in practice, I want my clients to not consume it for at least 30 days so they can tell how they're doing. I want to get a clear picture of what their body is like without even a trace of casein in it, and then see what happens when they add it back in. Okay, almost done. I have one more question, and that was just simply asking what my thoughts were about preparing for Thanksgiving. I know we're still in Canada. My friends in Canada, your Thanksgiving was already this week, so you're already past this, or maybe you have a slightly delayed family gathering. And then for those of us in the United States, Thanksgiving is next month. And then for people in places where they don't have Thanksgiving, I'm sorry for you, because we love it. One of my favorite holidays. Who doesn't love turkey and stuffing? I'm sure there are people out there who don't. But the question was just about like, how do I start to prepare for it? I know this year's a little different because of the pandemic. A lot of us probably are not having the big family gatherings that we have in the past, or if we are having a gathering at all, it might be either smaller or, you know, in a different kind of setting, outdoors, or, you know, whatever. So I recognize that you've got another set of issues to navigate. But I think one of the things to start thinking about now, if you are going to be celebrating with other people, and if somebody else is going to be cooking for you, is to think about how you're going to communicate with them about what it is that you need. Thanksgiving's actually relatively straightforward to get something to eat. You can't eat everything, you know, you shouldn't. I never insist, if I'm going to somebody else's house for a meal like that they make everything meet my dietary needs. But I do, you know that I have to ask for a couple things to be kind of okay, so it's safe for me. And the one biggest one, and this bothers some people depending on their family traditions, is that if the turkey was cooked with the stuffing inside of it, and it was just regular like wheat-based stuffing, I am not going to be able to eat that turkey, because I am sensitive enough to gluten that will be a concern for me. It'll probably make me sick. So even if I don't, you know, if I'm like, oh, I'm only going to eat the parts of the turkey that are on the outside, there's just way too much potential for cross-contamination. So that is one area where like I have to communicate that, like, you know, I just ask them, how are you going to prepare the turkey with the stuffing in it? And if they say, oh yes, we always do it that way, I don't say do it different for me. I say, okay, that's good to know. And then I know that I'm going to have to like not eat the turkey, or maybe bring my own turkey or something like that. And then the other thing that I always recommend people try to think about doing is just to, you know, be prepared to give kind of an elevator pitch not a pitch, it's probably the wrong word, but some kind of really brief statement, elevator, because it's like the time it takes to ride an elevator up, to explain what it is you're doing. So you don't have to get into all the details, be prepared to just tell somebody something like, I'm working with figuring out my food sensitivities. I've had some health struggles. And one of the things that's become clear to me is that there are some foods that really are not supportive of my health, that are like I'm sensitive to, maybe even allergic. Feel free to use that. You don't have to say I have a food allergy, because that's a fib. That's not going to be helpful. It might come back to bite you. But saying, I'm working with figuring out what my sensitivities or allergies are so that I can feel better. And so it's going to be kind of hard for me to just eat whatever you serve. So I kind of need to know what you're going to make, or I need to bring some of my own food. But, I want you to know about this ahead of time so that you don't feel, I don't know, what's wrong with Jamie? Why isn't she sharing, or eating the food we're eating? So think about how you would communicate that. It doesn't have to be all the details, and it's okay to tell people what you need, and what you won't be able to do. And there's always a middle ground. Like, you don't necessarily have to have them cook everything for you, nor do you have to be a complete martyr and like have nothing to eat. You can find some way to be like, when they say, oh, we're going to have Brussels sprouts, you're like, oh, great, I'll bring the Brussels sprouts, because I know a recipe that Jamie Gutsy by Nature posted on her blog that I can make and bring, and we'll all love it. So there's always a way to work around those issues, and Thanksgiving kind of lends itself to that. So start thinking about that now. Let me know in the next couple of weeks, question and answers. If you want me to talk about some very specific elements of it, I'm happy to share some of my favorite recipes, strategies for how I deal with those things. And you know what, if the pandemic is saying that, kind of leading you to, we're not going to have the big gathering, that's your opportunity to learn how to cook for yourself and make something really good at home, because you might just be at home. And I can share recipes there too, because I love Thanksgiving. It's usually just my husband and I. We don't have family nearby. And so it's just the two of us, and I cook a feast every year. I love it. I wish we had a whole big crowd to cook for, but that's just reality. We have lots of leftovers, and everybody loves Thanksgiving leftovers. I do especially. So those are the questions that were submitted this week. Again, if you want me to answer your question on a future session like this, I'll put the link in which you can submit your questions into the first comment underneath this on Facebook. And I look forward to speaking with you all again in a week. Take care. Bye for now.